Okay, so I am live, and I don't actually, it just seems like there's not really, like my headset is not picking up. And if you are here and you are comfortable speaking, because there's like no volume input on my end, can you tell me if you can hear me? And I think I have 2 minutes, so please just let me know if I am being heard. If I can't be heard, then I have to take off the headset, which is fine. Now there's no one here, so I don't know. It's a bit warm. It's always warm in here. Okay. I don't know. The volume is just, it's not working unless I am very loud. And it's so funny because today I'm going to talk about Larry Page. And Larry is very known for his vocal cord paralysis and not being able to really vocalize, extend his voice very much. And I am having like allergy symptoms and my throat's so itchy. So I also I don't think I will be able to do like an hour-long video where I have to really be super vocal. So let me try to see if okay. Okie doke. I don't know. There's nothing picking up on the volume. I might just take the headphones off then. If I can't be heard, because it's kind of like, what's the point of doing a video where no one can hear you, right? Yeah, I guess we'll just take this off. Okay, so it's picking up the sound. Now I can see that the bar is moving. Hello, and I'm doing another Techlord takedown video on Larry Page. And I did not advertise this video. I did kind of tell my friends that I was doing it. So if you're here, hi. But I'm like, of all of the tech lords that I've covered thus far, I'm such a defiant personality, and my toxic trait is that I really think that I can do anything I want. So like when I did Zuck, I was super nervous because I think very highly of Mark Zuckerberg. Or at least I think very highly of Mark Zuckerberg's psychology. I don't know that I think very highly of his choices, but as I analyzed him, I think of his psychology very highly. Larry Page, I also think of Larry Page's psychology very highly, but I think of Larry Page as being like a secretly terrifying person. And it's not really that I found anything on Larry Page that is particularly scary. It's just his pattern of behavior is terrifying. And also, if he did decide to do something that was super scary, he'd get away with it because no one can find him, which I will talk about later. So, yeah, I am a different kind of nervous to talk about Larry Page because he is a mastermind in a very specific way, and he wields a lot of power silently, and people that are silently powerful are very dangerous. So, I did Peter Thiel, who's a little Mhm. I did Peter Thiel, and I was not scared to do Peter Thiel because I have, like, personally made him my antagonist. Just the fact that Peter Thiel is a person that exists feels like it is a slight against my own existence. And I was not really afraid to do Peter because I'm not, like, afraid of Peter Thiel. I think that he has a particularly weak and predictable level of, like, psychological, I was gonna say failings, and I think I'm gonna keep that word. But with Larry Page, I don't know. He's like, they're all calculating in their own ways, and many of the tech lords are very chaotic in their own ways. But Larry Page is calculating, and he's like, he just gets away with everything, and that's so scary to me. Although I will say, and don't get mad at me for talking about astrology, but I'm pretty sure that Larry Page is an Aries, and the one thing that, and I'm saying this as an Aries, the one thing that Aries are very good at is like avoiding accountability, and it's something that I've had to um, be mindful of it myself and like make hold myself accountable. And that's why I talk about accountability so much, is because in my own psychology I have to like really forcefully hold myself accountable and not be toxic and not think that I can just do whatever I want. So very long introduction, and it's 7 minutes now and I haven't even started. So welcome to this Techlord takedown, and today we are doing the page behind the stage. And Larry Page is, as I kind of said already, he's a silent king. And one thing that I appreciate about Larry Page is that he started Google with Sergey Brin, and Sergey is still, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, I'm so horrible with names and pronouncing things in general, but Sergey is still uh, the co-founder. He's not like Mark Zuckerberg, where he kind of pushed everyone gently out of Facebook that was on the ground floor with him. The people that were on the ground floor with Larry Page when he started Google are pretty much still a part of Google or Alphabet. And I'll get into that momentarily. Uh, So I don't think that a lot of people know. I talk a lot about the tech lords and how they are kind of embedded in the government, and specifically the alphabet agencies, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, how they are all, the military, the DoD, how they're all kind of funding these tech companies behind the scenes to develop surveillance technology. And I will go further into this in a bit, but Larry Page really wrote the playbook for that. Larry Page wrote the playbook for funding from government agencies to build surveillance technology before Google was even a thought. So, uh, yeah, Google has been from its inception deeply embedded in the government and has always been at the forefront of surveillance tech. I want to say, and I am stating this very clearly, even though it is speculation, I believe this wholeheartedly. No one will ever be able to convince me otherwise. I believe that Google has super intelligence. I believe that Google, whatever it is that the tech elite are defining super intelligence as, Google has had that for a very long time. If you read the papers that Google releases, or Google's researchers, different proxies, shell companies, if you read the papers, the scientific papers that they have independently released, and you think about it as being under the umbrella of this alphabet conglomerate, it's very obvious that Google has super intelligence and is just like not being loud about it. And they don't have to be loud about it. Google can never announce that they possess super intelligence to whatever degree the tech elite believe that super intelligence will be built, and they will still profit from it because Google's profit model has never been, because of Larry Page and his psychology, their profit model has never been to be loudly vocal about anything that it is that they're doing. And when he started developing AI, he always had the idea that AI was meant to outperform humans. So I'm going to read this bit of an article that I found, and I have like a list of the people, or not people, well, people that have worked with Google, the alphabet agencies that have funded Google's different, or Alphabet's different projects. So if you guys are interested in hearing that, let me know, but I'm not going to just sit here and read it if no one wants to hear it, because I'm going to read this and it's pretty long. It's not that long. So on March 19th, 2014, Larry Page gave an interview at a TED conference in Vancouver, Canada. During the keynote, Page and his interviewer, Charlie Rose, sat in tall chairs on a stage with a table between them. The interview was essentially scripted. Page, his chief PR executive Rachel Whetstone, and Google CMO Lorraine Toohill had spent the day before in a Vancouver hotel room working on the presentation. Now, Page and Rose were looking away from the audience at a giant screen above and behind the stage. On the screen, there was a video game boxing match. One boxer had the other trapped in a corner and was mercilessly wailing on his opponent. The winning boxer was being controlled by an artificially intelligent computer program created at Google. This, Page explained to Rose, was the future of Google. Page pointed out that all the Google artificial intelligence could see were the same pixels on the screen that a human player could see. It had learned to play the game all by itself. Look how well it's doing, Page said. Imagine if that kind of intelligence were thrown at your schedule. Rose, enthusiastic but a little confused, chuckled. Likewise, the audience had no idea what Page was getting at. The rehearsals hadn't worked, and neither Whetstone nor Toohill were to blame. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. As Page enters his fourth year in charge of Google again, the company is in fantastic shape. The stock price is above $700 per share, and it's not hard to imagine a day when Google revenues will cross $100 billion per year. And yet Page believes the company faces an existential question. Can Google come up with another great business after search? One danger to Google is that eventually, not this year, not this decade, but inevitably, it will be so huge that it will capture nearly all the money any businesses on the planet spends on marketing. As crazy as this sounds, it's plausible. Google revenues are already bigger than all the money marketers spend on magazine and newspaper ads combined. It already owns all but the tiniest sliver of the online ad market. Google search is running out of room to grow. For Page, this means he now spends much of his time asking himself what that future is going to be and how Google creates it. He's got lots of ideas, and now that he's in charge, he's got his engineers hacking away at plenty of them. He never gave up on the transportation system he pitched to the University of Michigan, so now he has Google engineers working on self-driving cars. I don't think that I specifically mentioned this, but he also, in other countries, he has bought small tech startups that are working on flying vehicles. Then there's artificial intelligence. Besides dominating video games, Google's AI was also able to watch all of YouTube, learn from the experience, and draw a picture of a cat. There's a Google subsidiary called Calico that's working on solutions to the problems of aging and death. Google has another subsidiary, Google Fiber Inc., connecting homes in Kansas City, Austin, Texas, and Provo, Utah, with internet that's 100 times faster than broadband. Google Fiber may soon expand to 9 other cities, including Phoenix, Arizona, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Portland, Oregon. So this was written in 2014, I believe. Yes, April 24th, 2014. It is now over a decade later, and that was then. And so let's get to where we are now. So I want to talk a little bit about how Larry kind of became the boy genius at Google. and how he embedded himself into a level of mechanical control even when he was removed as CEO. So, when Google started, there were very few, if any, managers because Larry Page hates managers, which is very funny because he's such a micromanager. But he personally hates managers, and specifically project managers, and specifically project managers that don't have a tech background. So he was very upset when Eric Schmidt was being vetted to become CEO of Google that there were all of these project managers who had no tech backgrounds who were managing engineers, and the engineers were not doing what Larry wanted them to do. So there were rumors that were going around Google that there were going to be layoffs. People tried to prevent this from happening, but eventually Larry decided to fire all of the project managers and replace them with a VP of engineering whose name is Wayne Rossing. And Wayne, however his last name is pronounced, he would report directly to Larry Page. And Larry did this in a very public team meeting. So all of these people were let go at the same time. And this move failed spectacularly. A lot of people, engineers, have also a very specific type of psychology. And some people work really well without any kind of direct input. Most of them don't, and most of them didn't. And when Eric Schmidt came in as CEO, he had to restructure uh, all of the teams so that things would actually get done. And he did this to Larry's specifications. I think that the guy who came in and was trying to convince Larry to hire more business managers, I believe it was, he also had to be everything went through Larry. Even when Larry was not CEO, every decision went through Larry, even the hiring. And Larry refused to hire all of these people. So eventually, Rosenberg, he went back to Larry and he's like, okay, what am I doing wrong? And Larry told him, well, if you're going to hire people, they have to have a tech background. So pretty much everybody that worked at Google at this point had some kind of tech background, which is super. I don't want to say that it's not something that happens often, but it's not something that happens often. When Larry Page was removed, or I don't know if he was CEO at this time, but when Eric Schmidt officially stepped in as CEO because the stakeholders demanded it, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they still had total creative control. They never lost total creative control. Larry Page was considered the ultimate boss by everybody that worked at Google. So it was pretty well understood that all of your decisions, all of the work that you did must first be approved by Larry Page, even when Eric Schmidt was the CEO. The more that Eric was a good puppet, the more Larry kind of stepped back and let him make his own decisions, because one thing that I think that Larry doesn't want to do is have to communicate directly to people very often. So Schmidt was CEO from 2001 to 2011. He officially left Google in all capacities in 2020. But during this time, he did a lot for Larry. He was basically Larry's right hand, and Larry was more hands off. In 2007, Larry Page got really annoyed that his assistants were making him work too much, so he fired them, all of them. And then he kind of played this like cat and mouse game with the Google employees where he made them play Where's Waldo if they wanted to speak directly to him. And in 2008, he told Google's communication team that they could only have a total of 8 hours annually of his time. So he did kind of step back in the capacity that he was directly communicating with most of the company, but he was still very, very clearly running things behind the scenes, behind the stage. After 9/11, Larry hired fixers to broker access to secret government funding, and he used Eric Schmidt to gain access to executive administration of the United States. So he's like the first of the tech lords to do this, and he did it very quietly. Most people don't know that he did, but there are like records from 2009 to 2014 that Larry Page was like given crazy access to the administration. And I want to say, and I'll go into this a bit later, I know everybody loves Obama, but Obama's legacy is really like massive, irresponsible drone killings. That's his legacy. I don't care what anybody has to say about it. And he could not have done so without Larry Page. So I just want everybody to keep that in mind. In 2019, Larry and Sergey stepped down as CEO and president of Google Alphabet. They installed Sundar Pichai, I think is how his name is pronounced. And again, I suck at pronunciation, see? So don't stone me. But they installed Sundar to be like their new scapegoat. And Larry and Sergey still own 51% of Alphabet, Google. Alphabet is now like I'll get into that. They still own 51% of Google, and they're still on the board of directors. They just don't really have like official positions. Everything is now puppeteered through Sundar. A bonus level of Larry's influence and control, and I will get into the Fiji Island stuff in a bit, but he, during the pandemic, he kind of ran away and hid on his island in Fiji, and he was controlling, even through health officials, the narrative so that he could do all kinds of things that were not allowed during the pandemic and have no one know about it. And he censored information very heavily in Fiji and controlled the media in Fiji entirely. And maybe that's where he lives. Maybe Larry Page is in Fiji. Who knows? Who knows? But he did make very concerted efforts to control the media narrative in Fiji during the pandemic. That being said, let's go into a little bit the birth of Google and how Google started and was raised. So Google started initially as a PageRank page searching algorithm. It was initially called Backrub, and it was an algorithm that calculates the relevance of web pages to the queries, to user queries. And when Larry was developing Backrub, Google, he had this he centered its nurturing on delight and fun and I don't know, like a childish kind of play energy. And this has not really been talked about. I don't think that anybody really thinks of Google as being like a company of delight, but that is how Larry nurtured Google's growth. And it was very important to Google's growth. And so we don't really hear about this, but there were researchers who were very concerned about the way that Larry Page was developing Google and how the nurturing technique of delight demonstrated an increased user intimacy with Google's products and made users much less resistant to data collection. So this is Larry's business model before it was any other tech lord's business model. Like Larry Page really wrote the playbook for how the tech lords would play the game of data infiltration. Larry's nurturing technique resulted in increased user engagement. I don't really think that, I hope that I am making this clear. I think that I feel like I'm being way more clear than I actually am usually. So I hope that I'm making it very clear that the user engagement addiction model that like social media companies are now using was initially Google's specific business model. Um, Larry, in a way, he kind of weaponized, in a sense, to normalize this omnipresent data collection. And now we are all living with the consequences of that. And I say that on YouTube, which is like his platform. Don't be evil, which people know as the um, Google motto, was not Larry's, it was not Sergey's. It was, I think it was two different people took responsibility for this becoming like a Google mantra, and they were both in the more corporate side, and they would send emails and write it on whiteboards in the office. So Larry and Sergey eventually adopted "Don't be evil," but it was never their motto. Also, I think it's very interesting, and I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to speculate on it. I'm going to let everybody else speculate on it, but I think it is super interesting that Larry and Sergey, before Google, and I talked a little bit, I read that article that talks about how Google's business revenue model now works. But Larry and Sergey, before Google, before Backrub, they wrote an academic paper that was raging against ads in search engines. I think that's very interesting. And in the earliest stages of Google, they did try to sell to a company called Excite, and they were willing to sell Google for $750,000. But the CEO said nah. And now Google is worth $913 billion. So, oopsies. Talking about how So we just kind of talked about the actual user engagement model playbook that Google wrote through its delight nurturing technique. But the Alphabet agency funding playbook was also written by Google. And Larry and Sergey's initial Stanford research, because that's where they met. Of course, they met at Stanford, but their initial Stanford research was funded by an unclassified program managed by the CIA, the NSA, and the Department of Defense. And this was not Google. It was not related to Google. They made $4.5 million for a search and indexing system for mass surveillance. And that was prior to Google. And then in 2013, after Google was like the search engine worldwide, Google acquired Boston Dynamics, and Boston Dynamics is a semi-autonomous battlefield robotics company. And they did this despite their public-facing PR teams really actively denouncing killer robots. So in 2013, Larry had orchestrated the purchase of Boston Dynamics, which was very specifically building killer robotics. And I think this has a lot to do with the Obama administration and the things that he was doing for and with the Obama administration. But actually, I want to say, and maybe it's just because I use Google as a search engine, it's super hard to find any information about this. It's really difficult to find information about Larry Page at all. And I've spent like the last week really trying to dig into him and not like coming up with things, and some things I'm not going to talk about here, but like it's so hard to find information about any of this, but it's out there and it's sourceable. So if you want to dig, I suggest that you do. I will always suggest that people, like, you don't have to trust my word on anything, because especially because I'm just kind of developing patterns of behavior, and I am more concerned with building a psychological model through the Techlord takedown than I am of actually giving you all of the information. So I encourage everyone, for every video I've done in the past, every video I will do in the future, for this video, if anything interests you, go and look it up yourself. yeah, so Google Federal is a company owned by Google, obviously, that even a lot of Google employees don't know a lot about. A lot of Google employees don't know that Google Federal exists, and they're based in Washington, D.C. It's managed by Michael Bradshaw, and Google Federal's, I don't want to say business model, but what Google Federal does is they exist in DC to negotiate contracts with intelligence agencies. And a lot of people have no idea about this. Alphabet, the Google owner, Google, Alphabet, their advisory board is littered with Alphabet agency individuals, people who are either directly worked with specific Alphabet agencies. A lot of the people on the advisory board are connected to the CIA, and a lot of people don't know that either. Larry still maintains plausible deniability on Project Maven. I will get into Project Maven if you don't know what it is in a bit. He maintained plausible deniability on Project Maven, and he framed the way that he helped develop lethal defense projects as being a humanitarian effort. And he's really good at kind of spinning things in a way so that it doesn't look like he's doing the very nefarious, very evil things that he is doing behind the scenes, behind the stage. So getting into what is now textbook Techlord Billionaire Behavior, the TTBBs, Alphabet, and a whole bunch of other shells. Alphabet kind of is run as an effort to allow Larry to fund his moonshots without putting Google's ad revenue at risk, because Google's business model at this point is ad revenue. And he's so hyper focused on moonshots, and like it's like shoot for the moon, like things that seem like they would be impossible to accomplish. Larry loves to fund those kinds of startups. So he throws a lot of money at startups that he considers moonshots, and he does that through Alphabet and some other shells. Or I guess Alphabet's not a shell company, because everybody knows that Alphabet owns Google, and Google is operated through Alphabet. Larry threatened to cause immense chaos through resigning if Google did not restructure their stock plan to maintain his personal control. And this gives him a dictatorial level of control without any kind of public accountability, which again, that's a pattern of his behavior, is avoiding accountability and kind of working behind the stage so that he can do things, he can be a director without being a direct actor. This was called a serious breach of responsible corporate oversight and democracy, officially. But he can do whatever he wants, so he is doing whatever he wants, and they did it. They restructured the stock plan, and he and Sergey own 51% they own the company. Larry uses shells and proxies to acquire startups, as I said, and even islands, which purposefully obscures his tracks from even the stakeholders at Alphabet, definitely from the public. It's why it's so hard to find any information on Larry Page, is because he doesn't really, he really works as a director and not a direct actor, even when he is doing things that directly benefit him and his family. He used NASA Ames to negotiate taxpayer-subsidized hangar access. Very clever. And he also gamed federal contracts to acquire seriously discounted fuel, which is its own thing. And I talk a little bit in the description about how he has all these donor advised funds. And donor advised funds are like a lot of the tech lords, a lot of billionaires, they use donor advised funds to And I'm not saying that this is what Larry is doing because I don't want to be sued in any way, but the pattern of behavior with the elite is that donor advised funds kind of are like a way that you funnel money into charity so that you can get tax write-offs. And a lot of the elite, they use donor advised funds to kind of park money, and none of that money actually ever goes to charity. So it's like a tax evasion scheme. And I'm not saying that Larry Page is engaging in tax evasion. However, he has been caught several times at this point. It's been revealed that his organization, his foundation, his charity foundation, funneled all of his annual distributions into donor advised funds, and that gives him indefinite control of the funds without having, like, requiring disclosure or payout to actual charities, as I just explained. And the initial time that he was caught, this was called a $400 million sleight of hand. I think in 2023, this was addressed again, and it was noted that he had $6.7 billion of activity to his foundation with limited charity payout. So he's just parked $6.7 billion in a donor advised fund. Another TTBB is, of course, union busting, and Google, Alphabet does have their own union, the Alphabet Workers Union. But initially, Larry approved very expensive anti-union law firms, and he did aggressive internal surveillance of threats. And at the time that he was doing this, he was not acting CEO. So this kind of fell under Sundar's umbrella, and it was kind of like he kept the rain from hitting the company in a way. Sundar did. This was an effort to maintain culture stability, which was the executive reframing of why they were engaging in union busting activities. And then the Alphabet Workers Union, which was formed, they inevitably filed charges for ongoing intimidation because, of course, and discouragement of YouTube TV union formation. So, yeah. Another TTBB that Larry personally is involved in, there was a sexual misconduct case against an executive named, senior executive named Andy Rubin. And after accusations of sexual misconduct were made against Rubin, Larry personally orchestrated a $90 million exit for Rubin, and also approved a $150 million stock option package for Rubin, without any formal board approval. So, yeah, that's all of the TTBBs that I have here, but there are more because, again, he kind of wrote the book for how tech companies are formed, how tech companies create billionaires. So there's a lot of little TTBBs, but I thought those were the biggest ones, the ones that were most worth mentioning and most kind of built a web of his psychology and consequently the psychology of a lot of other tech lords. So getting into Project Maven. Yeah, it is very I love the term TTBBs. Hi, Chris. I hope that everybody will use textbook Techlord Billionaire Behavior, because there are a lot of like corporate oopsies, and they kind of all follow a pattern of behavior that's like, it's so typical. It's so typical and predictable and boring, but that's just my opinion. So on Project Maven, which is another, at this point, Project Maven is not Larry's project, but I will say that it's Larry's project because he it wouldn't exist in its capacities if it weren't for Larry Page. So Project Maven is an alphabet agency project. However, getting back into the origins of Google and what Larry and Sergey were doing before Google was formed, Larry's initial Stanford research was funded by, again, an unclassified grant, which created a system that is capable of tracking and uniquely identifying users for counterterrorism purposes. And I love to talk about how when the CIA talks about counterterrorism actions, they are very terroristic. So Project Maven is like a terrorist initiative. And the way that they did this was by mining immense data trails. And this was their initial research. When Google's search ranking algorithm was developed, it had already, because of this initial research, it already directly aligned with national security priorities. And this helped Google to embed mass surveillance tech into its design from the inception of Google. The AWCF team. So the Algorithmic Warfare Cross-Functional Team is a 2017 Pentagon initiative that incorporates AI and machine learning into military operations for processing vast amounts of surveillance data from weaponry, from drones and tanks and subs and things like that. It uses AI for automatic identification of objects, and it fuses visual, geolocation, radar, infrared sensor data, and allows real-time target detection, which is totally not scary at all, and situational awareness for the people that are using this as a tool. Maven's algorithms were initially trained on manually labeled images. And again, this is through Google's search ranking algorithms, initially trained on manually labeled images, which required hundreds of personnel. And when I was reading about this, the thing that stuck in my mind was this sounds like what we do with CAPTCHAs. It really, and this is speculation because I could not find anything proving this, but if you go down this rabbit hole, it sounds like they have been using CAPTCHAs to train military surveillance tech. Especially when you think about like how you're proving you're not a robot, what the images are that you have to label. It really sounds like CAPTCHAs are a way of getting the general public to label surveillance technology for the military. And again, I could not find anything that actually says that that is what's happening, because if that was what was happening, they wouldn't leave a very obvious paper trail, but there's a paper trail. And I suggest if that's something that interests you, you go down that rabbit hole, because it really does look like they've been using CAPTCHAs to force us to train their machine learning killer robots. Google was contracted by the Pentagon in 2017, and Maven was used by the 18th Airborne Corps in live fire exercises in a project called Scarlet Dragon that allowed military weaponry, AI-based military weaponry, to assist the 18th Airborne Corps in doing some pretty nasty things. Maven was used in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, Kabul, and Ukraine. And it kind of paved the way for military usage of AI. In 2018, thousands of Google employees protested and several resigned because, again, Google is not supposed to be evil. Don't be evil. I think like a dozen people resigned, and there was a massive internal protest. So Google did not renew with Project Maven their contract in 2019. But then Palantir, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, they all stepped in. So Google provided the foundation for Project Maven that allows all of these other companies, and Palantir is so nasty, but Google started it. It allows all of these other companies to kind of just like, they don't have to build a foundation. It's already there. They can just come in with their data training and now help Maven to evolve, which is what they're doing. Larry, because he can't go back to Project Maven, because when employees found out about this, they were really upset because he can't go back to Project Maven. He's now trying to find other ways to other defense contracts to embed Alphabet's technologies into the United States military. And Maven now encompasses much broader AI infrastructure. So LLMs are now a part of Project Maven, just saying. Pretty much everything that we think of as being an artificial intelligence technology is now embedded into Project Maven. And again, I'm not saying that Project Maven is a Google entity, but it could not exist in the capacity that it does without Google. And Palantir would not be Palantir to the extent that they are now a company if Google hadn't built this foundation. I really cannot emphasize that enough, because when I was reading about Project Maven, I was very upset, very disappointed, and the decisions that were made on this level, I can only imagine how disgusted and really disenchanted with the company all of the Google employees must have been. They fought it so much that the contract wasn't renewed a year later. So the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency now leads the next stage of Maven development using all of the companies that I said before: Microsoft, Palantir, Amazon Web Services, which I talked about in the Bezos for Bezos video. So the NSA had a project called PRISM, and the PRISM surveillance system, Larry kind of puppeteered Google's PRISM involvement and allowed the NSA to collect internet communications from multiple tech companies, not just Google. Because of the search ranking algorithm that Google has, PRISM was collecting all kinds of data from tech companies. And at this time, Google was very publicly denouncing government spying, despite directly enabling government spying. And this built the surveillance infrastructure for the United States intelligence operations in total. Everything that the US intelligence has on civilian surveillance exists because Google gave it to them. So this did not take me as long as I was thinking, because this is the last section. And again, it's probably because it's really difficult to find information on Larry Page. I found all of this, but I worked for it. So where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? That probably really aged me, but where in the world is Larry Page? Nobody knows. And this is one of the things that I find to be really, when I say, when I told you guys I'm terrified to do this video, the thing that is terrifying to me about Larry Page is that he's freaking invisible. He is invisible on high government levels. So Larry has an island hideout, and I talked earlier about maybe Larry Page lives in Fiji. I don't know, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But he did buy several remote islands in Fiji, and he used this to achieve this prepper mobile lifestyle that all of the tech lords are doing, where they're buying all this property and then becoming hardcore preppers for this doomsday event that they believe is coming, that they're pushing to create. And he also, as I said, he then manipulates the local government so that he can control local narratives, and he did this all throughout the pandemic. He still functions as the silent hand of Google, and he is known to attend meetings as he feels he desires, but he's mostly absent and has been since 2013 from product launches. He doesn't do calls. Like in all the way back in 2008, he told the communications team that they only get 8 hours with him a year. So he hasn't stepped back in a decision making capacity, but in the capacity where like he has to be there and he has to talk to people, he hasn't done that in over a decade. So he's just kind of like orchestrating all of Google's decisions without actually being a part of Google. It's so hard to serve him. He's been subpoenaed several times, but if you don't actually serve a subpoena, you're not required to show up. So it's really hard, I'm going to say impossible, to serve Larry Page because he has no valid addresses. He has no traceable locations. He can't be found by law enforcement. He has no showed, is that right? No showed to the European Union antitrust probes and to US Congress hearings. He has never testified before Congress. In 2018, when all the tech lords were summoned before Congress, Google had an empty chair because he just did not show. And Marco Rubio said, I think it was to Facebook, but I didn't write it down, so don't quote me on that. But Marco Rubio said, there's an empty chair next to you for Google. They're not here today, and maybe it's because they're arrogant. Or maybe it's because okay, so I didn't say this. Or maybe I did at the very beginning, but Larry Page, his reasoning for not being very communicative is that he has vocal cord paralysis and like on both sides, so it's really hard for him to talk. I did say that at the beginning. And I will say that even though he didn't personally show, they did offer to have other people come to hearings in Larry Page's place. So it's not that Google is trying to avoid accountability altogether. It's that Larry Page won't speak to anybody. And because he can't speak to anybody, I just want to be fair about that. Although he did have a habit of avoiding accountability and avoiding talking to people. And also, I think the reason that he and Sergey have been connected to each other for so long is because Sergey kind of like when Larry starts to go off the rails a little bit, Sergey kind of reins him back in. And also, I don't know what's going on in Larry's mind, but he's also like known to kind of like not talk to people directly, but like talk to corners. So I don't know. And I am here to kind of like armchair diagnose. But Larry Page, because it's so hard to find information about him, it's like, how do you really build a comprehensive and trustable diagnosis about somebody that has spent their entire career being unknowable? And he is like truly unknowable. Like I said, he can't be located by authorities. He can't be found by private investigators. He was subpoenaed, and this is very interesting. And I have a post on YouTube asking if people want me to talk about the Epstein connections with the tech lords, because Jeffrey Epstein is a huge topic, and I haven't spoken about Epstein and the connections that he has to the tech lords in previous videos because I thought it would be too distracting. But now it's like it's becoming like a pattern of avoidance on my side. And I can't avoid talking about Epstein anymore because Larry Page was very specifically subpoenaed in both a federal and civil lawsuit against JP Morgan. And JP Morgan was accused of allegedly facilitating Epstein's whole sex trafficking network. And Larry Page was subpoenaed because he was recommended as like a high profile client. And so they tried to get him to come and testify. And of course, because he can't be located by authorities and he can't be located by private investigators, he no-showed to the hearings for the JP Morgan case. And a quote, the government made good faith attempts to obtain an address for Larry Page, including hiring an investigative firm, but discovered the addresses were not valid for Mr. Page. So that's all I'm going to say about Epstein's involvement here. But I did ask, are you guys interested if I do an entire video, not a Techlord takedown video, but like a video specifically on how Jeffrey Epstein funded most of these companies and how pretty much all of the tech lords have some kind of direct connection to Epstein, and if not a direct connection to Epstein, definitely a direct connection to Epstein's money. If that's something that you guys are interested in, let me know. If you're not interested in it or you think I shouldn't do it, because I very purposefully build these videos around telling stories that most people don't already know. I work really hard to dig up diamonds in dirt. So uh, I've already kind of spoken out too much. And I think because a lot of people are interested in Jeffrey Epstein, and I have been obsessed, I will admit, I've been obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein since 2013, 2014. And then there was an event on Twitter where, and I'm almost afraid to say this, but I will say it, a certain celebrity with the last name Baldwin threw a huge tantrum on Twitter because it was revealed that he was flying the Lolita Express. So since then, I've been uh, really digging deep into Epstein, and so I have some specific opinions and specific perspectives about him that a lot of people might not have because this is new to a lot of people. It's not new to me. Um, and there's also a guy who his name's Charles Frith. I will put that here so I don't forget again. But Charles Frith, he used to talk a lot about Epstein, and he actually published his black books with all of his direct contacts. And now Charles Frith is freaking unhinged and not trustworthy at all. So if yeah, I think it's a necessary video to make. It kind of worries me because I don't um it is my toxic trait that I think I can get away with everything, but also the last couple of years have been showing me that I'm really I can't just do whatever I want and say whatever I want. And now my eye is twitching. So yeah, I don't know. I'll make it if people are interested in it. I know everybody's super interested in Epstein, and I think talking about his money, his little money web, and why I think a lot of the tech lords are now working with Donald Trump. Um, I am I don't know if I'm happy to do that for you, but I'm definitely capable of building that web for you guys. And this did not even end up being an hour. There we have the page behind the stage. And I guess then I will work on, I'm going to do Larry Ellison next. I'm going to do Larry Ellison. I'm going to do Larry Ellison next. And as I'm doing the research for Larry, I will also do a little web connecting of Jeffrey Epstein and all of the tech lords' connections to him. But I'm probably not going to do that live. I don't really want people to know when I will do that. So I will just post that when I make it. Yeah. Larry Ellison is a little weirdo. They're all little weirdos. I don't think that you can become the kind of you can't become a tech lord without being a selfish little weirdo. And in a lot of ways, Larry Ellison is a selfish little weirdo. And he's kind of the reason I wanted to do the Larrys back to back is because he's kind of the opposite of Larry Page. The way that Larry Ellison kind of functions is very bravado and very public. So yeah, I will do Larry Ellison next week. Probably what's today, Wednesday? I'll do him Thursday. And yeah, that's it. So I don't know if you guys have any questions for, oh, if you want me to, now that the video is pretty much over and it did not end up being super long, because I kind of talked really fast, I was whatever. I will tell you guys the web of funding and connections that Google has had, if that's something that interests you, because now we're at an hour. It's like nothing. So yeah. Oh, I don't need to. I have this on my phone. Ugh, my throat is so sore, so itchy. I've had a lot of hot tea today, so I don't know what's going on. Yeah. Yes. No. Yes. No. Yeah. No. I don't know. What do you guys want? Do you want me to read it? All right. So, some of the key grants and research funding that Google acquired in 1994, as I said, it was a multi-agency funding initiative through the Digital Library Initiative. They got $4.5 million to fund their initial Larry and Sergey's. Well, it's Larry Page's algorithm, and that's the thing. It's like I am now talking about Larry Page in ways that Larry Page obviously doesn't want to be portrayed or even discussed at all on a platform that Larry Page owns. So that is its own thing. But yeah, in 1994, they got $4.5 million for the Digital Library Initiative that's funded Larry and Sergey's Stanford research that was foundational to PageRank Backrub, but was not Google related. It was not PageRank. It was not Backrub. It was just how they kind of they then pivoted to developing that algorithm. But first, for the Digital Library Initiative, they made $4.5 million to build an algorithm that kind of was the foundation of surveillance tech. And some of the agencies that were involved in that were the National Science Foundation, which, I mean, if you want to get funding for things, you get funding through the National Science Foundation. So NASA, and also DARPA, which is a Pentagon related agency. The Massive Digital Data Systems Program, which is sponsored by the NSA and the CIA, helped them to have an early development of data fusion and mining, and real-time intelligence analysis. So again, this was their foundational structure of building surveillance tech for the government, prior to and as they were developing Backrub, or what is now known as Google. DARPA's evidence extraction and link detection, which was the MDDS successor and was a precursor to their total information awareness system. And total information awareness later became the global mass electronic surveillance system post 9/11. So again, pre 9/11, Larry and Sergey were building all of this technology that was the foundation of surveillance tech for the United States government, and then post 9/11 really capitalized on it. In 2003, they also had a CIA contract to customize some of Google's search engine features uniquely for the CIA. Again, in 2017, 2018, they worked on Project Maven. They had a $9 million Department of Defense AI contract for drone video analysis and automated target recognition. TensorFlow was an AI platform core technology that was deployed through Project Maven, if you know what TensorFlow is. And they expected their revenue growth through Project Maven to be $250 million. But again, because Google's employees said, hell no, we won't go, in 2019, they did not renew their contract. Google Federal, which is their Washington, D.C. subsidiary, kind of operates as a shadow unit. Again, I said that most people don't know about Google Federal, even if you are a Google employee. They focus on contracts with intelligence agencies, with the Department of Defense. They are partnered with Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Unisys. I don't know, is Unisys, is that how that's pronounced? They have contracts again with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the Army. Like I said, they acquired Boston Dynamics in 2013. They actually sold it in 2020, which was a DARPA-funded military robotics firm that specialized in killer robots, what they said that they were not gonna do. Jedi Cloud Contract, which was never bid officially by Google, but it was a $10 billion Department of Defense cloud infrastructure contract, which was inevitably awarded to Microsoft, actually, which was an internal lobbying and strategic planning to kind of, Google wanted to use this to basically do what Amazon Web Services does, but for the military. Michael Bradshaw is the director of Google Federal and a key manager in like communicating with the Pentagon and other alphabet agencies. Eric Schmidt, he started at Google in 2001, left Google in 2020, left Google as a CEO in 2011. But he was like at the forefront of all of Larry Page's communications with the government, because Larry Page doesn't know how to talk to people, and that's like one thing that keeps coming up, like Larry Page does not know how to talk to people, and that's relatable, I guess. Eric Schmidt also facilitated Alphabet, Google's strategic positioning and the national security technology ecosystem. And I didn't really look this up, but I'm super curious why Google's stakeholders wanted to embed Eric Schmidt as the CEO of Google, because they were adamant that Eric Schmidt had to be the CEO of Google, and Larry Page was not having it. Larry Page didn't get a say. So I'm curious why Eric Schmidt specifically, especially because Schmidt did just inevitably end up doing whatever Larry Page wanted, and also because he was really good at kind of talking to the government, talking to the alphabet agencies, and acquiring all of these contracts and maintaining like a good relationship with them. Liz Fong Jones is this, she's a whistleblower, and she exposed the internal conflicts over the military contracts and Project Maven specifically. And the Alphabet advisory board members, as I already said, it's littered with people from the NSA, from the CIA, from the Pentagon. Like, all of these contractors are also advisors on Alphabet's advisory board, which creates like a revolving door between Alphabet and the Alphabet agencies. And I'm not saying that's why Alphabet is so named, but it's cute to think so, right? Some supporting entities, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, they all have defense contractors that partner with Google Federal on very classified projects that I can't find anything about what Google Federal is actually doing, just kind of like the skeleton of how it is that they function as a business. DARPA, NSA, CIA, all the alphabet agencies that provided funding to Larry and Sergey initially and continue to fund them. And of course, even though they kind of scammed the system, they still have like an ongoing relationship with NASA Ames. So that's it. That's all I have for the page behind the stage. I hope that you guys learned some things about how Google controls everything and how we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in as a society, especially with surveillance technology, if Google had not platformed all of the surveillance tech for the United States government, and then every other country to freaking copy. c'est tout, c'est fini. I don't know if you guys have any questions, but if you do, I will give it 5 more minutes. This was so short. I must have spoken way too fast. It's short, and I started off the beginning with technical difficulties, so. Oh, also, Mark Zuckerberg's supposed to make like some massive announcement or like some Mark Zuckerberg's supposed to make a massive announcement or some interviews supposed to be released where he reveals some product that Meta has. So that's happening today. I'm curious to see what that is. I'm not going to lie. If Larry Page had actually adhered to the mantra of don't be evil and hadn't given so much surveillance technology to the military and kind of written the playbook for tech companies to do so, I would really deeply respect the way that he runs his business. I too wish that I could be the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain and have a giant tech conglomerate that was as successful as Google and live on an island where no one could find me. I think it's like, I purposefully lived off grid for years. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have social media. No one could find me. Everybody thought I was dead. And even though I've kind of resurfaced now, I've done so in a way where still nobody knows who I am. So if I could live like Larry Page but not evil, I would do that. I kind of already do. I just don't have the money to buy an island, so really nobody can talk to me. I would love to live life where people only talk to me if I allowed them to. And I think that's one of the things that's been really cool about doing Techlord Takedown is like I can admonish the behavior of the tech lords while also acknowledging like if I had money, I would do similar things. I just wouldn't have similar motivations. And I think that's really revealing of myself and kind of like as I have like a tech company, if it ever goes anywhere, it will help kind of keep me in check that not only do I understand this about myself now, but I have like a very public record of admonishing people for doing things that are very similar to things that I would do, so then I can't do them. But I'm like not a fan of the government, and even if I have to take money from the government to build things that I want to build, to scale things as I want to scale them, I will not take money from the military. I won't help the military do anything. I would never. It's so, I don't understand. Because there's like, if you just wanted to do scientific research, then you could get money to do scientific research. And it's not like it's, yeah, it's not Department of Defense money, but it's not nothing. And like, what are you going to do with the billions of dollars? Like he has what, $6.7 billion just sitting in a DAF, just parked so that he doesn't have to pay taxes maybe. Like, I don't know. I just don't have any respect for that whatsoever. What are you going to do with all that money? You can buy several Fiji islands and still have $6.7 billion sitting around doing nothing. Like, what are you going to do with all that money? I agree. I think that the way that all of these people are like hoarding resources and doing the very Jungian shadow unconscious labor of having this fear that something's going to happen and then actively working to realize that fear. Like, why are you being preppers? Why are you building underground bunkers? Why are you buying islands? Why are you hiding from the consequences of your actions? So you're just going to build all of this weaponry that allows citizens, civilians to be murdered, Obama, and then you're not going to like actually face the reality of what it is that you did. You're going to hide underground. I don't respect that at all. So I think that there are a lot of things that we can do as a society to stop them from fulfilling their own prophecies. But I don't know. I don't think we're powerless, but I do think that we give away a lot of our power. And if I start talking along those lines in these videos, they're going to do something about me. So I'm just going to end that there. And I love you guys for showing up. I really appreciate it. And everybody that watches this video, if you want to look into the tech lords, if you want to look into anything that I said here, especially Project Maven, look into Project Maven. Please look into Project Maven. And I don't really have a diagnosis for Larry Page. He's just avoidant. Well, I have some very specific ideas about what's going on with him, but I don't want to say them on video. So, since you're my friends, if you want to message me, I'll tell you what I think is going on with Larry Page. But otherwise, yeah. I am going to end this here. And thank you guys for being here. And this is super short. And I love you. Thank you, Chris. I enjoy doing these. They're fun.